Genesis, like the old Genesis when Phil was only relegated to the drums, the backup vocals. Yeah, Funny was good.
All righty, folks, it is time to sit down, and we had a nice mellow start this morning, didn't we? Yeah, that's all going to change now. The fire hose is in the room. See? Before we jump into that, Anton from Anton's Biltong walked up to me and just let me know he's got bags of Biltong for $15 each. Half of the proceeds are going to go to AJ to help him get his new engine. And he said he'll have more tomorrow too. So just wanted to throw that out there. Not only are you buying delicious Biltong, but you are helping a fellow TSPer out. Now, Matt Powers sent me this wonderful biodary, and I'm not gonna. He's like, I'm an author, an educator, a citizen scientist, an entrepreneur. No, here's the thing about Matt. First time I heard him on Spirko's show, he told a story about being a high school teacher and having his kids do actual research and figure out how much money college was going to cost and how much they would make once they went into the career from that. And almost got fired.
It's true.
Almost got fired. And then he's like, screw that. I'm going to go do my own thing. And what he's done since then is really dug into the science of soil. What he's talking to us about today is Fix Your Soil Fast, which I'm stoked to listen to because I am just putting in all new raised beds in my zone 1 out of my zone 2 because I'm an idiot and had a garden in the wrong place for a long time. And my soil needs to be kickstarted in those raised beds. So I'm going to be taking notes this time for sure. Next week, he has a free webinar coming up that you can sign up for and learn even more.
5-day conference.
5-day conference. So like, was it 35 speakers?
Yeah, just about.
Just about, yeah.
Trying to fit a few more in.
He doesn't just delve into the why. He's going to tell you how as part of this presentation, which I really enjoyed in your presentation last time. So with that, I'm handing it over to Matt.
All right. Can you guys hear me? Do I need to like bend it further? All right, we're good. All right. So I was tasked with bringing the pragmatism, bringing the how-to, and connecting it to all the stuff I usually do. So I'm going to dive into this right now because soil is the linchpin. If you can see this, I'll explain what it is. Regenerative soil is soil that grows and gets better every year. Soil got here in the first place because of these natural processes. Soil can be regrown, restored, and created using the same natural processes that brought it to the Midwest in the first place. So we can speed these things up, we can target these things, we can tailor these things, we can drive them certain areas because not all organic matter is equal or the same for the environment that you're trying to deal with or create. Same thing with minerals, same thing with soil biology. And we have a linchpin where regenerative soil is combined with all those things, but it's also the inverse of that. It's the linchpin to our communities, our civilization. Our local food, fiber, meat, medicine, and economies all rely upon fertility in our soil. Otherwise, none of those engines will run. The stability of our civilization depends upon soil. But first, who am I? I'm Matt Powers. I was a ski racer a long time ago. Then I became a musician. I did that for almost a decade. I got to play with all sorts of people. It was a lot of fun. I met my wife in the middle of that. We got married. I knew she was my wife. 3 days into it, she put on "Wouldn't It Be Nice" by the Beach Boys, and I was like, "You're my wife." Yeah, she put it on vinyl, you know. But what happened was she had all these medical things that were going on. We couldn't figure it out, and then when our son was 1 year old, she had radiation for cancer and lost her thyroid. And what happened after the radiation is 3 months later, she got another form of cancer caused by the radiation. So, and yeah, I won't give it that. There's not enough time. But we left New York City. I quit that amazing job where I got to do whatever the heck I wanted. I was paying for I was paying for a 2-story apartment in Brooklyn. My ears don't function very well with this thing. And that it was like my dream to be able to just live with doing bass. I was a bass player, 4 strings, don't have to think too hard. They pick you up, they deliver you, and then they send you home. It's so easy. And it was the same songs for 7 years. John is still playing those songs. It's been 20 years. So I became a substitute in Fresno. If you guys know Fresno, it's not a happy place. Fresno is very depressed. You get to see there's like the fallout of the Central Valley, essentially. And I became converted to being someone who focused on helping kids, focused on helping community. My mom was a teacher. She created all special ed curriculum that was adopted all over America. She was the first to create it in the 70s. And so her mom was also a teacher. And so I got some of that. But once I did it, once I began teaching, it was one of those things where I instantly got mad at what was happening to our kids. I was like, this is what they're teaching you? What? And I didn't have like anything other than a big heart to relate to these guys. You know what I mean? I'm from New England, a ski racer, a musician, the rock musician. If it was metal, I would have been able to get along with the kids in the Central Valley. I don't know if you guys know, they're all in like corn and things I don't do. And so there was no overlap other than the fact that I really wanted to help them. And we had our other child during that time period when I was getting my master's degree. Oliver, we called him a miracle baby. They didn't know if without a thyroid you could have a baby. So we did it anyway. It was health-wise very costly, and she kept getting cancer. So I became this really quirky English teacher. This is me with chopped cabbage. I'm feeding kids cabbage. I know. And they ate it. And I got really into seeds, and I got really enthusiastic about it. I started doing things that were impossible. This is a corn from the 9,000 feet up in Peru, and it doesn't grow in America, except I figured it out. So by applying permaculture common sense, it's photoperiodic. You need a window of light only, and you need to be at a certain elevation. I was at 2,000 feet. I put it on the dark side of the hill underneath oaks, and it grew just fine. I didn't do anything else. I just was like, well, permaculture would dictate that, you know what I mean? We put it we make the microclimate, right? And I figured out it's not the photoperiodic, like you need 12 hours of this or that. It's the amount of energy. So I put it in the shade. And so it thought it was getting the same, it's joules essentially to the plant. It's total energy. This is why I was able to grow winter plants underneath 3 to 4 canopies in my food forest in the middle of summer in 112 degree heat, because they thought, because I wasn't getting much light, I assumed it was winter. I was able to figure all these weird things out because I just love it, and I think like an educator, and I want to be able to pass these things on, so I have to think about them enough so I don't sound foolish when I articulate them. So I started writing curriculum for kids. Because there was no curriculum for permaculture. I started doing it like this is all throw sow. I trained seeds so that you threw them on the ground and they grew vigorously. You do this once and you're like, wow, one thing grew, Matt, thanks. And then next year you save from that like one plant. Hopefully it's more than one plant, genetic variety and all. But that one that adapted will regrow. But genetics, you got to know your plant. Some plants can do it from one. Corn, you need like 100 for genetic like viability, just so you know. That's why there's so much amaranth. I wanted genetic viability. So I wrote the book. It did this in a month. And for Madera County substitute and then turned into English teacher, this was like basically as much as I made in a year after taxes, California taxes. Yeah. So I wrote these books. They went viral. They went all over the world. They got translated. People volunteered to translate it. They translated it. It's in all these different languages. Worked with all sorts of people. Became a speaker. I was already a teacher. I was teaching teachers how to not use homework by doing authentic learning. The reality is if we go out into the woods, we learn to chop wood together. You're not going home and drawing a diagram and doing worksheet and then getting it checked in. You're never going to forget that. That's authentic learning. And that can happen in any context. And you remember those teachers that made something come alive for you? You're like, I thought history was boring. And then that one teacher is like, cares and knows how to reach you. So I focused on that. And then I became a citizen scientist in the process because I kept having to like go to higher levels of rigor and dig deeper and deeper. And then I found no one was willing to do all the reading. My mom was like that too. No one was willing to do all the reading, and that's what her advantage was, that she was willing to just do the work. And that's really all I've ever done is done the work. My boys are big now. A lot of people see the videos online, and they're like, "Your kids are so cute." And I'm like, "My men, my men they're big, you know." This is actually he's like this tall, and this was 2 years ago. So they're just so huge. But in that process, past 10 years, I've published over 24 different publications. I have one book in that mix that's on its 3rd edition. So there's like 2x, right. You get, and then another book has a 2nd edition. So it's not all 24 books. But one of those editions took six months to create. So that's why I count it. And we should all be doing new editions. Like this event, it's always a new edition. And it always is up to date. That's how we learn should be. That's why it's so relevant. So I've been focused on a bridge to the regenerative future. And today we're going to be talking about these 5 keys in a way that is going to allow you to make decisions that are going to improve your soul no matter where you are. It's going to give you lenses of understanding. And then I'm going to work through an example so you see how I applied those lenses. So the 5 keys, it's these. There are 5 keys that make up soil that gets better and better every year. And the soil that is here on the earth, where it came from, this is how it was created. It was created in a partnership and a combination of cycles that involve soil biology, organic matter, plant roots, and photosynthesis, minerals, air, and water. But the Goldilocks amounts and varieties of these, given your different climate. Because what's Goldilocks for the desert is going to be different from Goldilocks for Canada in the middle of the temperate forest. So let's just dig into it. Air and water. Did you know that air is mostly nitrogen? Good. Okay. And very, very, very small bit of it is carbon. And then there's oxygen and hydrogen. That's the same amount. Those are the same elements that create all life. Did you know that? That means the air itself is the breath of life. It has everything in it. All life. Let's look at their cycles, though. Things will jump out at you. I just know it. So this is in my book, Regenerative Soil. Got copies up here. You can find it on the permaculturestudent.com or regenerativesoilscience.com. The carbon cycle, if you notice, you're like, wait a second. Fungi is releasing way more than people. Yeah. And we killed the soil and we killed the fungi. So what does that mean? We need more carbon cycling, just more naturally. And we just need it in the soil. The fact is that the corn in this picture, this takes up 400, corn in the Midwest takes up 400 times the amount of CO2 released by man-made means a year. So, yeah. We can do whatever we want, but the reality is that we got to like understand what things are. So carbon is a good thing. We need more carbon cycling. We need higher levels of carbon cycling. We need it to be going through natural means. We need it to be going through into the soil, not machines, not some crazy greenwash boondoggle. We need to understand that we do need carbon in our soil. It's vital. That's what the blackness of our soil is. But your car is not causing any problems. You're not doing anything that's causing CO2 to go, okay? It's not causing any of those things. And that truth is coming out. More and more and more people know that. So I just share it. You guys probably already knew that, right? Yeah. All right, good. I've been telling that same exact thing for years, though, and people, but I know this audience. But global oxygen has been dipping, just as desertification, just as all the primeval forests. are dying. Well, of course, they're the only thing that produces oxygen, except for those new special rocks at the bottom of the ocean they found. Right. And the hydrogen cycle. Notice something about the hydrogen cycle. Plants are at the center of it with photosynthesis, using water and releasing either protons or hydroxide. Those are the things that attract cations and anions. So all of it is pH, because hydroxide is alkaline. Protons, H+, that's how we measure acidity. It's all right there. This is also in my book. The nitrogen cycle, we see so much of the air is that, did you guys know that plants can actually pull in nitrogen from the air into their leaves? Yeah. Yeah. And then they can have bacteria inside them that are fixing nitrogen from the air that are feeding them directly, up to 47%.
All plants are nitrogen fixers.
All plants, if they have biology in them, that biology has to be able to give the plant nitrogen. And that's why they're all nitrogen fixers. They're not nitrogen fixers as in like the legumes where they're forming nodules. These are freely living bacteria inside the plant, or fungi. And when we say fungi in this context, we're talking about yeast. And they literally form a cloud of nitrogen around themselves to counteract the bombardment of superoxide. That's all they're doing. So all healthy plants that have trichomes, which means plant hairs, have nitrogen fixing bacteria and fungi in them. So if you're compacted, you need to aerate your soil, do some broad forking, keyline plowing, or ripping. Ripping is how we got out of the Dust Bowl. Well, we did straight shanks and we went deeper. But we can do this on contour. We can do this more strategically than they did, though that's literally what saved them. And so that's just one aspect. Let's keep going. Photosynthesis and plant roots. A lot of people don't understand that plants on land are venting off the oxygen, so it's an uneven equation. So they're driving energy and carbon into the ground. Otherwise, they'd be bringing the oxygen and oxidizing it as it went in and gassing it off all at once. An even equation. No, it's actually a blessing that it's separated. It vents it off so we can breathe it and doesn't shove it in the ground, which would be terrible. All right. So, but we needed the ocean because we need the plants to oxygenate it, and the biology of the ocean survives. And the West Coast has so much it needs to answer for. I don't know if you guys know about the conveyor belt of moisture. The fact that the Sierra Nevadas have been purposely dehydrated, purposely burned, and not safe low burning, they've cut off the hydration for the rest of the nation. We're just a big island. We're a body of land, and the conveyor belt of moisture from the oceans is carried from tree to tree, forest to forest in Eichmann spirals. If you guys remember Bill Mollison's original permaculture designer's manual. Yeah. And that's the thing is, it's like they literally cut that all off. And they also killed the whole West Coast, 90% of the kelp forests. That's our air. In the middle of winter, there's no photosynthesis. It's all coming from the ocean. So we have control over the things. They're actually very simple, but you have a lot of narratives out there that are screwing things up. Though if you talk to Iowa farmers, they're like, well, we need CO2 because our fields that's the one thing they're lacking. We got everything but CO2. Why? Because everything is plants around them. There's no compost. There's no decomposition. It's just plants. And so what do? They release oxygen. And they eat up all the CO2. So it's a more complicated perspective that we need to embrace, especially to support our farmers and stop gaslighting so much of our society. Monosaccharides and polysaccharides. So when they're sick, plants are releasing monosaccharides. They're releasing the actual food for the bad bacteria and fungi to come destroy them. When they're healthy, they release polysaccharides. And this is non-reducing versus reducing. We don't need to get into that, but basically it's pathogen-based versus power plants. Well, actually I should. So reducing means it's gaining in energy. That's what those protons are. They're actually electrons. It's H+. So So you're adopting all this free energy. And then you look at the equations, if you check out the chemistry, when it's acidic, it's all H plus 3, right? And then when it's alkaline, it's all oxygen, O. So you're either losing energy or you're gaining it. That's why I say I don't want to put oxygen in the soil. Oxidizing, literally, if you remember chemistry, is the liberation of energy. That's why lighting fire is oxidative stress in your body, is cancer. All of it's related. We don't want to oxidize. So we want things to be reduced, not oxidized. And as things are reduced, the energy is stored in the organic matter, which is the carbon. It's a battery. The carbon in the soil is a living carbon battery. And the microbes and the plants are exchanging that energy all the time. We need to let plants go through their full cycle. Otherwise, they'll back up with sugars, back up with all these different things, and they won't be able to turn the nitrates into protein or amino acids. It'll back up, and then they'll be full of nitrates, and that's why those like caterpillars and those crickets are coming and sucking your plants. They're sucking the nitrates out. So these are the stress signals to insects to come kill them, or their strength. Plants actually don't have a choice. There's this myth that goes around that they have like all this power. They're like, I choose you, microbe. Bing. And it's like not that way at all. They're passive. They're just like, the sun's out, go! And it's not just, I mean, it's not cakes and cookies if 90% of it is taken back, right? 90% of the exudates are taken back. And then also there's two things happening. There's secretions and then there's excretions. Plants excrete. Very different. So when you're powered by the ambient environment, you're not able to turn off the flow. You go, and that's why these plants get sick, and then they can't. It's hard to get them out of the cycle. So they're primarily passive. They've got internal, external biology. They evolved with these microbes in place. So when we sterilize seeds, when we use synthetic nitrogen and phosphate to sterilize fields, and literally that's what they do. We've created a situation where plants are missing their gut biome. In a metaphorical sense, they've got root biome, they've got like a leaf biome, they got all of that, right? The phyllosphere, all those kinds of things, rhizosphere, but it's essentially their gut biome. And we all know we get really sick. We have a loved one who's really sick, who's on 6 months of antibiotics. How's their gut microbiome? How's their health? They're in a lot of trouble, right? And they need to get out of that zone, or something else could happen and they could never recover, right? Especially if they're older. Plants is the same thing. It's the same exact thing. So if we enhance photosynthesis, it affects everything because it allows them to process their sugars and nitrogen properly. So soil minerals, often, especially folks in this community, you've done everything. You've done the biology. Everyone's saying, oh, you need biology for years. All you need is compost, right? For years. And now you're like, but something's wrong. Like I did all the compost, but I have the same blight that my neighbor has. And it happens in August when it's super humid and hot and 100 degrees. What's going, right? You have a mineral deficiency that happens in that time period because calcium transport shuts down. So you need water-soluble calcium. And because cell walls are made of calcium, that's why compost tea works. So there's all this antagonism. These minerals don't like playing fair. They all want to compete with each other. The reality is it's organic matter that buffers them out and provides the literal space. It's a physical buffer. Like instead of it being just sand, pure mineral, right? Mostly silicates with bits of different things. You have all this organic matter in between those things, but literally physically buffering them and giving you distance, but also glomming up excess nutrients. So it's so incredibly important. There's a lot of cycles. I have them all in my book. It's important to understand how they all work together and develop your fluency around them, especially if you're lacking in anything. If you're lacking in something, you go and look at one of these charts and you find where you are on the chart. And then you go look at the pH and EH and see where you are in EH, pH. And then you can put those two things together and drive yourself through the rest of the cycle and start cycling it and building it. Or stopping the leaching, right? Depending on where you are and what's happening. Molybdenum. Molybdenum is needed for nitrogen fixation to occur. I'm going to release a video on this later this week on my YouTube. And all these things are so critical. If you're missing one of these factors, you're going to have things not work in your system. Cobalt. You only need a teeny little bit of cobalt, but for instance, if you're like in Australia or if you're in an area that was kind of grazed or leached or fertilized to death, you might not have cobalt in high enough numbers. You might have to do some, I mean, there's a bunch of different things you can do. And that's also in the book. I'm not going to put any specifics on that. But the reality is you need these things. The centerpiece of B12 is cobalt. If you don't have cobalt, you actually don't have microbes that can thrive because they too require B12. B vitamins are biologically vital. They are your cell metabolism. That's what B vitamins are, right? So they have the same cells that, nematodes are animals too, right? They are. Soil organic matter. They're the most abundant animal on earth. So carbon is organic matter. There's so many ways that we can create it. Compost versus plant roots. Plant roots are always going to win. They're faster at it because they create it in situ and at the form that it becomes soil. So when we're breaking something down, we're breaking it down, and those things breaking it down are breaking it down to smaller and smaller pieces, and then those things become parts of soil. But there's a timeline. I mean, wood chips, we all know it takes a while, right? This is that thing I was telling you about. The net primary productivity of field corn is 400 times more than the annual increase in atmospheric concentration of carbon dioxide. Which for us, because we're not riding on guilt or anything, we're talking about simply drawing down organic matter in massive amounts. So we build our soil by treating our plants well, having them fully photosynthesize. We reduce antagonism in our soil, and we create structure all at the same time. And you lessen the effect of the antagonism. So this is planting cover crops and crimping them, inoculating them, and letting them break down so that it goes through the full slow cycle. If you flail mow it, and I didn't know this for years, Ray Archuleta explained this to me. If you flail mow it, you release the nitrogen too fast, and things tend to gas off. And you guys kind of know this. You lay a plant downward, and it'll very slowly die because its roots are still in the ground. It's not going to thrive from there. Like maybe some put up an arm, you know what I mean? Most of them are just going to lie down and give up, but it's a slow process, which is exactly what the soil likes, exactly what the soil biology needs, is that blanket coverage. And hopefully frost or snow comes, and then you've got that. I mean, you guys know the ground is 32 degrees beneath the snow, and then you got a little duff layer, and you're like, wow, it's actually not bad. Obviously, if you're in the permafrost of Alaska, it's frozen down there, but you guys know what I'm talking about. So chop and drop is something I used to do. Crimping is, I think, more appropriate now. Compost tea. Every 1% increase in soil organic matter, you're able to hold an additional 20,000 gallons of plant available water on the top foot per acre of land. Remember, that depends on where you are and how much organic matter you have in the soil already, because these things aren't linear, they're exponential because it's 3D and it's structure. So we're going to save a lot of water. We're going to buffer. We're going to hold nutrients. We're going to hold life. We're going to hopefully add some biochar, right? Or bone char. And so soil biology, that char and that organic matter is going to be incredible habitat for the soil food web. You've probably heard of the soil food web. Basically, the gist of it, plants put out these exudates. Some people call them cakes and cookies. They are not. And what happens is they say that the protozoa and nematodes feed upon the bacteria and fungi, and then their waste, their manures, microbial manures, reaches the root. On what timeline are we talking about? Do you guys know how fast roots grow? Yes, you do. Is it really going to wait around for the manure to happen? I'm going to wait. No. it's a plant. And if you've done hydroponics or aquaponics, you know these roots can in 12 hours. It's like blah, 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 blah. It's like the microbes, they're fast and all, but if it's like, one nematode per drop of soil solution, you're not going to build up like the microbial manures to make the difference in real time. No, it's the legacy of this that your plants benefit from. This already has had to have been happening for a while. Turnover of life. And then you will have these benefits become much more manifest. So this is much more secondary. This idea that the exits are actually for something much more sinister, perhaps. So the rhizophagy cycle, rhizophagy, root eating. Roots eat microbes. They feast on these things. And they literally release exudates and suck them back up like a net. So they release it and then suck it back up. And then they bombard the biology in there with oxygen because they want to release the energy and the nutrients. It rips off their cell walls and their protoplasms, and they're giving up electrolytes. And then some of them survive, regrow their cell walls, and get pushed out through the root hairs. You won't have root hairs unless you have biology. They've proven this. Rhizophagy is how you create root hairs. So this is primary before that whole soil food web. And the reality is this happens even in the most difficult circumstances where like the soil sucks, right? It's like the soil food web you build up to, you have the harmony garden thing, but rhizophagy is going to immediately happen. This is why all the compost tea experts will be like, well, you're going to want to pour the compost in the ground right at the growing tips, right there. It's like, I wonder why. Because plants are basically like carnivorous. So that's actually the end result. One of my mentors was like, I've designed all the dyes to find all the different possibilities of what they will do. And I was like, okay, what's the last thing? I'll do the last thing to show that it works. And I just did methylene blue. If you guys know methylene blue, you know methylene blue. If you know, you know. Methylene blue, and you can see the bacteria being expelled from the root hair. I saw it the first time I looked for it. Pretty wild. Mycorrhizal fungi, they partner with roots. They evolved with it. There's so many benefits. And the reason there's so many benefits is because mycorrhizal fungi, the fungi of the roots, mycorrhizo, fungal roots, they literally evolved together. So when you're inoculating your plant, you're simply bringing back biological evolutionary partners. And they are awesome together because they literally are like the other half of the plant. So when we're bringing back mycorrhizal fungi, or making sure that it's included when we're planting trees, please, or any landscaping, this is why like the city of Austin has a 29% like success rate for native plants, because they're not inoculating. They don't understand the soil. So inoculate, please, because you're simply bringing it back. And if you're like, wait, I want my local, that's fine, take my course. But also know that the dominant one is Intraradices, and it's dominant everywhere on Earth. Biology is pretty wild in the fact that there's winners, and they dominate. So Cerevisiae yeast, we were going to make alcohol no matter what. It was inside the grape plants to begin with. It was inside the corn to begin with. So corn beer, it's inside everything. It was going to happen. There was no stopping alcohol from happening because Cerevisiae yeast is in everything. So that's like we're just bringing back nature to nature and seeing like a wild result, because that's what nature wants to do. It wants to go wild. So that's rhizobium. You guys know rhizobium, nitrogen fixing nodules. Plants have microbes inside them. So those endophytes live inside them. They have the greatest effect on pH and EH and nutrition. Biofertilizers, biostimulants, biocontrol, buffers, filters. They do it all. You could have arsenic in your soil, and your mycorrhizal fungi can actually make it so your plant doesn't uptake it. All right, so how do you do this? Well, you got to pick and choose. So I've got menus in my book. So you might find the things that you need. You might need to mobilize phosphorus. You might need to solubilize phosphorus. You might need to do things to bioaccumulate phosphorus because you're on an old dairy and they put too much phosphate. And it's like literally you're looking at their soil under the microscope and it's crystals of phosphate, and all the organic matter is like all desiccated and dried up with little crystals all over it. Yeah, because they killed the soil. This is what it looks like when you kill the soil. It dries up the organic matter and then covers everything with those concentrates of minerals. And phosphorus minerals, like phosphate, they glow in the work I do with the epifluorescence lighting. Don't trust ChatGPT on that one. That's the thing. When you do enough research, you realize there's layers to the internet, and there's like a top layer where they like hide things. And then you find the exact, precise, specific scientific name, and suddenly, oh, there's a different story. So NADPH is phosphate that's been known for decades to autofluoresce. You go on to, Wikipedia or ChatGPT and be like, actually, phosphate cannot autofluoresce. And you're like, I'm looking at it on my microscope right now. It's triple phosphate. Yeah. So anyway, you got to do your own testing. That's why I do my own DNA testing. That's why I do my own microscopy. That's why I create a protocol so that farmers can do it themselves, see for themselves, see before and after. And I'm also creating a database that is going to have before and after testing with the actions. So for the first time, you can look at your site and see your actions and the changes over time, but they can also look at your actions. And if they're local to you, go, wow, you invested that much money and got this result. Honey, I think we need to invest that money because look, this is the result we've been waiting for. Let's just do the technique. And it takes away the questions. It takes away the worry. We have way more and then when you actually do it and it works really well, first of all, he's going to be so happy that you guys did that because it verifies that what he did does work universally. And we all know compost is good. But when we find out that compost with these certain native plants works better in our bioregion for this type of crop, we're suddenly shifting because we're in feedback nature with the nuance of our bioregion. And that's going to change everything. So giving people confidence, giving people the way to actually make informed choices because they have the actual feedback loop to see honestly what's happening, that's what I've been after. So getting down to the actual microbes, the enzymes, ions, that's what I do, and that's what I've mapped out so that you can do the testing, get the feedback, and then find where you are and what you need to do. And then you do preps. So I've got all the recipes in this book. I go up to tonnage, so you can go up to acreage. I've got DIY. You can make your own arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi. You can make your own inoculants. I even rhizobium inoculant, even the sodium alginate coating of it, and all the stuff that they do. You know what I mean? I've got it. Azospirillum, Azobacter, Bacillus megaterium. These are all possible. If you've done biology in high school, you can do this stuff. It's all you know what? Even better. If you've made mead, you can do this. And so it's all inside this book. This book right here. I've got some copies here. You can also find it at regenerativesoilscience.com, thepermaculturestudent.com, or anywhere they sell books. It's a bookstore, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, all of those. So then you make your plan. You set up your solutions for soil organic matter, your mineral amendments, your biofertilizers and biostimulants, your cover crops, and your aeration and hydration. Your specific types, the amounts needed, and the duration and the timing. And now you've got the start of a holistic plan. It gets more specific though. But you guys see how those things relate directly to the 5. And all that's testable. All of it's testable. And that's really what, I mean, when I told my dad what I was doing recently, he was like, wow, that's really clean and clear. No one else has done that. And I'm like, it is muddy water. And there's a lot of people that like it that way. And I do not. Because the reality is the actual science is behind behind community, behind clarity. And they're preventing that from happening with the way they're doing it. So use these lenses. You will develop clarity. Use these. I've got cycles. I've got the EH, pH charts. So pH is one leg of an XY. Did you guys know that? There's corrosion rates. You're like, I put that thing in there. My plant doesn't have it. It's still deficient. What's going on? An EH issue. It's the other leg of the XY. So there's corrosion rates. I mean, look at nitrogen. Look at nitrogen. Nitrogen's like, oh, I'm not trying to be difficult. I just am. So this is ammonium, right? And this is nitrate. It's not a straight line. Zinc is, though. Zinc's like very predictable. It goes along pH, and there's a few others like that, but mostly not. And the reality is that there's a Goldilocks spot, a favorable condition. This is pH. This is EH. EH is oxidation. How much energy there is, or energy potential is a better way to think about it, because it's ability to exchange energy, and it's the amount of energy that's in that flux of exchange. And so there is a Goldilocks spot. And outside of the Goldilocks spot, notice it says toxicity, deficiency, 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 toxicity, deficiency, toxicity. So it's all, we're surrounded by deficiency and toxicity. And it's finding that Goldilocks for your site. And it's going to be different in Illinois and in southern Texas. It's going to be different the coast of California from Maine. And that's good, because you'll find unique advantages everywhere. Grow your blueberries in Maine, please. So the soil food web, you can find the actions that fit your context. This is IMO. There's an endophytic IMO design there. Johnson Su. We love Johnson Su, right? Yeah, Johnson Su's wildly amazing. And it's because it operates, it's what's most natural. Let it go. Let it be for a year. Let it. An annual cycle, there's a reason why nature designed it that way. There's a clock to everything. So that's why I love it. I love it. Hugelkultur, again, following nature, following what's passive, super powerful. And then I go through all of it. I go through how to do all these preps in here. And folks have actually doubled their harvests. So these folks, I had actually already visited and sold a book to, my purple book. So the Permaculture Student 2, they learned all the Elaine Ingham stuff. They were doing it. They were very, very happy. They were already happy. I felt like I did good. And then I get this message, and I'm thinking about it, and I'm like, well, that doesn't, I mean, it's good for the regenerative soil, but it doesn't make my purple book very good. The purple book's free. There's a lot of things in it, but the soil section is transcended by this book. And they literally had all the permaculture know-how. They had all the things. But then when they got this book, they doubled their harvests in one season. And that's the kind of clarity that it gives. And once you get the fluency of it, you're like, okay. It's the same thing with Ray Archuleta, where he goes to the fence line of a farmer, grabs a shovelful of that soil, and then a shovelful of the field soil, and then holds it up to the farmer. And the farmer goes, I hate you. All right, tell me. All right, I'll do it. Whatever, Ray, just tell me, and I'll do it. I get it now. It's so painful because it's so painfully clear. And they do the action because they know they have no choice, because they know what the right thing is. People make the right choices when it's clear and they have the right information. So I'm going to run through this really quick. I got 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Sweet. On time. All right. So my Texas site. Can you guys see that? It's sand. It's like not even like it's sandbox sand. I didn't realize this was possible, but I got sandbox sand. And that's actually good for certain things. It's like growing in like hydroponics, but it makes it so you constantly have to add things because there's nothing there. So it works really well when you're adding things, but when you stop, everything's like, wait, you got to build it up. You can even see the steam on the lens of my camera. It's how hot it is down there. So what I've been doing, I've been working on this book, Regenerative Soil Microscopy, creating the tests and protocols that show us what is regenerative, how to prove it, how to see it, and it has keys and microbial profiles that's never been available for anyone ever before. So both those books are the first of their kind. It went #1 on Amazon bestseller for a while, #1 new release, and I've been testing. And this is my sandy, silty soil. You can see it's a little bit like there's nothing. I mean, there's bacteria, of course, but there's nothing. It's sand. It's just mineral, sand and silt. And so I've been doing these tests. You can see over here, it is 8.0. It's hard to see, but this is actually in the microscopy book. The microscopy book has case studies. So I go through all the parameters of holistic testing through different case studies. So I show on compost, hot compost, Johnson Su, vermicompost, but not just one type of compost, series of each one. So it's a comparative case study. So I've been applying all these solutions. What are the challenges? It gases off the carbon and the nitrogen because it's so dang hot. This is why we don't leave soils bare. And this is why it's so ridiculous. They're like, we got to add in more nitrogen this year. And they left it bare all winter. And you're like, dude, what were you thinking? What do you think's going to happen? It's like their wallet is just like evaporating through their pocket all winter. Ugh. So we got to remember the nitrogen cycle. So much of it's in the ground. So much of it's inside the plant. So this is from the book. This is under the what to do section for nitrogen. Great sources of organic nitrogen that can be added to soils and compost are all animal manures, rhizobia inoculants, azotobacter specifically, green manure, cover crops, legumes, nettles, and even sweet potatoes. They can fix nitrogen from the air in their leaves. Actually, sweet potato cover crops and squash, mixing those two, I've seen as cover crops more recently. And it's wild. I mean, you've got a field of pumpkins and that you let break down in place. There's so much water holding. There's so much organic matter and life that happens in that field. It's really exciting what's going on. So cover crops of nitrogen fixers, but also I would also say as much diversity as possible. If it's just 3 nitrogen fixers, it's not going to be as good as 2 nitrogen fixers and then 2 like non-nitrogen fixers that are just support plants. Because you can have phosphate solubilizers, phosphate accumulators. You can have all these different cover crops. Plus compost, plus fish and kelp fertilizer. These sandy soils, this is, I'm not going to read it all, but this is also, I go through all the problems that you will commonly face and the solutions for them in regenerative soil. So you have sandy soil types. I'm just doing what is in the book. So everything prior, I'm also going to add arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi, azospirillum, because they work together. They're synergistic microbes that evolve together. Biochar, I'm going to build a Johnson Su compost. And then my pH is too alkaline, right? So I'm going to make sure I add organic matter, manure, fresh coffee grinds, and even mulch to the soil surface. A lot of these things soak in mycorrhizal inoculant. This is all redundant. It's the same steps. So what we realize is that you can add some things from that list, like water and EM regularly because it's acidic and we're alkaline. So adding in stuff with vinegars or naturally acidic brings us down. And then keeping things more moist. oxidation is directly linked to dryness and wetness. So if it's oxidized and alkaline, that's dry, desert-like. California, right? Central Valley. That's what that is. So keeping things moist is incredibly important. Keeping things more acidic for me is very important. I have 55 gallons of biofertilizer that I'm brewing right now. High salinity. We've got high salinity. Johnson Su. That treats that. There's these cover crop plants that I could use. Mycorrhizal fungi again. Compost and other natural farming like JMS or Lab or Limo, EM, biochar, all these things, again, they count for all of that. That's the thing, is the solution for one of your problems is often going to be the solution for multiple of your problems because they all work and reinforce each other. So everything prior again. So I'm doing Johnson Su compost, but I have to make sure the compost is low in phosphorus because I'm already high in phosphorus. I want to use EM because that sops up the phosphorus. You can see it there. It's sopping it up. And actually, this red, I put in something with phosphorus in it, and then I had to eat it all, and then it was gone when I tested it because it was inside the microbes. They say like, oh, it's inside the microbes that the nutrients are. Yeah, literally. Sop them up. So they remove the phosphate from the biofertilizer ferments. And then also this is insects being digested by fungi. This is a compost pile that I focus on insects with. And that because we've got a lot of insect pressure down here. So that really helps. Biochar. My son, we applied that. We do compost teas. We do a lot of mixture deliveries and like EM and compost or EM and, Bavaria bassiana is endophytic. So Bavaria bassiana is entomopathogenic fungi. So it kills bugs, turns them white and destroys them. But that also lives inside plants beneficially. So your plant can literally be bitten by something and then kill it. Yeah, there's a lot of them. There's a few of them in my book. All right, so but there'll be more in the new edition that'll be coming out the end of next year. This is inoculant on the roots of this mycorrhizal fungi. This is something we did. This is what it looks like. With the right microscope and the right lighting, without any stains, mycorrhizal fungi lights up. And so we can actually measure if the inoculant worked. You put it on, did it work? Are they glowing? There you go. So far, we've had some success here. Is this a video? Oh, this is a video. Okay, yeah. So you can see that's my soil, and it's steamy, I know, but that's my soil, and you can see the bits of sand still, but it's all spread out. That's what we're doing. And you can also see that it goes down, then stops, and then there's sand and then there's bedrock of limestone. That's why it floods. So it was a good year. We had lots of things growing, and yeah, that's almost 5. Well, if the top of that wasn't on the floor, it would be over 5 pounds. And then this year, so I doubled the organic matter in 1 year. And that went from that to like just real heavy fruit. And you can just tell the plants are doing way better. I was able to grow so many melons this year. This is a Chanterelle, that French melon's so good. Lots of great squash, really good looking things, great color, great expression, and really heavy fruit, really thick fruit. Lots of melons. Watermelons did excellent this year. So what can you guys expect by following nature? Well, if insects could just eat all the plants and some plants weren't healthy, all the plants would disappear. The reality is there are plants that don't get bitten by the insects, and the plant next to it's like being destroyed, but there's one plant's like awesome. Save seed from the awesome plant. Okay? Because part of it's the internal biology, part of it's the soil, part of it's the minerals, and a huge part of it's the photosynthesis if it's getting more light than the plant next to it. So pest infection, virus, and disease immunity is a real thing. It's not a myth. It's not a unicorn. It's a real thing. And it comes from having the right biology and the right minerals. It's both. And you can't have one with like the top 2 levels are only biology. The bottom 2 levels are minerals. So you got to get your minerals right to get the biology right. And then you got to have enough biology to get the rest of it right for your plants. High nutrient density. Because they're able to process the sugars in the time allotted for them during the day, they don't fall behind, they don't get sick, and if they're more efficient with their photosynthesis, they are actually organizing, growing more, putting more into the soil, accessing more nutrients. So that equals faster maturation rates and higher yields. And if you guys study Albrecht, you know those stories. They were getting things weeks early. I've seen it. That corn, that crazy corn from Peru, the second year I grew it, it was 4 weeks earlier. Plants adapt. Plants respond. And the end result that like everyone's going to immediately recognize is your food's going to smell unbelievable. Your food's going to taste and look unbelievable. And then the thing that the farmer's going to notice right off the bat is that there's a massive decrease in fertilizer inputs. By just using yeast, lactic acid bacteria, and like water kefir is both those two things, kombucha is both those two things. Just using those things and purple non-sulfur bacteria in a small amount, which, you know, that's the thing that eats algae that you would get at a pond store or an aquarium store. Just those three things can reduce nitrogen inputs dramatically, in some cases up to 50%. So they don't change anything. They just add the biology, and suddenly it makes it so it doesn't hurt the soil, because it's lactic acid bacteria turns nitrates into amino acids. So it chills out all the negative effects of the nitrates, and then it allows the plant to like have it all incorporate properly. So they're literally, with biology, turning things around. And then mycorrhizal fungi, we do it once. It's an inoculation you do once, because in nature it's regenerative, means it comes back every year. So you do it once, and it's 30 to 40% potential, like more yield. 30 to 40%. Imagine if and this is what I'm talking to certain people about right now, behind the scenes, is that if we have the ability to promote and provide arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi to farmers at a large scale, in one season, America's farmland can increase yields by up to 30 to 40% on the same amount of land. Let's go. And you get all those other benefits where it's huge increase in organic matter. So you're buffering everything. Every year your soil is getting better. So this is not like a one and done. You do it. Well, it's a one and done with our actions, but not the reaction. You do it once, and then you get this benefit that continues on forever. So this is the power of all this. And mycorrhizal fungi can replace phosphate fertilizer completely, depending on the soil type, depending on the plant type. For barley, they've already proven that for barley, it's just get rid of the phosphate. It's a $78 billion industry. Do you think they haven't noticed my work? They have. They do not like me. They send sometimes Trojan horses into my course, and I'm like, oh, you're not genuine. Okay. Yeah, it's wild. But what we're really talking about is less work over time, because we create momentum. Nature is about momentum, and all of human civilization has been literally riding off natural momentum, natural resource momentum. We're there. So healthy soils equal healthy plants, and that equals healthy people and healthy animals. It's one continuous cycle. We're all linked. So what if you improve your soil every season significantly? Well, starting a week from Monday, November 25th, we're going to do just that. We're going to cover all these things I've talked about. We're going to go through my book chapter by chapter, section by section, and we're going to talk to the people who inspired the information, the people that are doing it, the professionals out in the field, and the scientists and the researchers that discovered this. I mean, rhizophagy, there he is. He's the guy who replicated that one Australian study that discovered it. But these guys showed that all plants are doing it. And he's also the trichome guy that showed that all trichomes have biology in them too. So I talked to the actual researchers, farmers, gardeners, and compost experts, and you can meet them. And I connect and combine all the different methods, all the different KNF and biological farming and Elaine Ingham. I connect all of them and I go down below and find the caveats, connections, and really it's the biochemistry, because individual microbes that are doing each of these things. So I map those things out. So don't miss it. We begin 11/25. So that's a week from Monday. regenerativesoilscience.com. I hope that you join us. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm Matt Powers. Before I go, I want to mention that if you go to r-soil.com, you can sign up for free for a 5-day conference next week that has free giveaways, raffles, goodie bags. You can also keep it and all that, but those are different options. But you can literally get in free. And there's over 30 speakers. We've got Ray Archuleta, Dr. James White. We have David Montgomery, Erosion of Civilizations, David Montgomery. We have so many incredible people. Jeff Lowenfels, Teaming with Microbes. So many incredible authors, so many incredible scientists and farmers. So please join us, r-soil.com, r-soil 2024. It's going to be incredible. I'm Matt Powers, grow abundantly, learn daily, and live regeneratively. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Matt. How many of you have been here before? Raise your hand. How many of you are here for the first time? Here's how Q&A works. I stand here and you walk to me because Jerry Springering this room is really hard. So we have time probably for 1 or 2 questions. Jake, what do you got?
So I feel like I just took a calculus course that I dropped the first time and I took it the second time. I'm starting to figure stuff out.
Woo!
Back on the phosphorus slide, you had all these cycles. You said, well, if you find out where you are, you can go through the whole cycle and fix it. How do you find out where you are? Is it testing? Is it?
Right. So if you're like low phosphorus, or if you're adding phosphate and it's not processing, not reaching your plants, there's going to be a holdup in that. And usually it's antagonism. You're going to go and look at that antagonism chart. You're going to also look at the microbes that move those things. And so you're like, wow, well, my plant, is not partnering with mycorrhizal fungi. Have we tested the soil for phosphate? You test the soil for phosphate, and you're like, our soil is like toxic with phosphorus. And so you're like, you have to do the tests and then use the diagrams to find where you are. Use the charts and the collections and groupings to find what works for you and what also is what's missing. Because when you look at those 5 aspects, you're like, I do this well, I do that well. Am I watering enough? I don't aerate my soil. How compacted is it? You know what I mean? Some of us, speaking to age, some of us, I've thrown out my back I had a back problem for over a year. And it's like, I wasn't going out there and moving things. I was not doing anything. And so it's like, you may be in that position, but it's really important to get out there, interact with your soil, do the testing, look to find where you are. And that's essentially all that is. This is an aid that allows you to better understand your soil through those tests and through your own actual experience. So you're out there looking at the roots, you're out there doing those testings. Yes, it's all in the book.
Buy the book.
And you can come and look at the book and check it out and see. Yes, you can buy the book.
Roy, what do you got?
On sale today.
Why did you point and look at me when you was talking about age? That's not the question. But hey, so has this been done in a study with PFOS, PFAS, and being able to neutralize those? And the background on that, we've got a lot of soils around the country where folks have had that and found that it's on their farms, and essentially it's totally ruined their farm, that they can't use animal or plant on that. And if we can use something like this to either neutralize it, cap it, cover it, whatever, then we can restore some of those farms and bring them back to proper use. So
that's a great question. Yeah. So PFAS, like my first instinct when I went to go try to test for it was the people that created it are the people who test for it, and then the EPA. And I was like, wow. So I don't know who I trust less. The person who created the problem is testing for it. And then I look it up, and there's organic Maine dairy shut down because of PFAS. And I'm like, who else? And it's organic. And I'm like, I don't like this pattern. It's like, it feels like they're targeting certain farms to shut down. And the fact is, if we go, and there's a video, many of you probably have already seen it. There's a video of a researcher going to a remote location where humans have never been, going to a top of the mountain peak lake that no one's ever been to. There's no trash. And they test it, and it has over the actual EPA limits for PFAS in that water. It is in the water cycle, and so it is ubiquitously spread out at 4 parts per billion all over the world. So I feel like it's another greenwash kind of thing in order to do a land grab. So much of what they're doing right now is a land grab. If you guys have ever read the book by Philip K. Dick, Penultimate Truth, penultimate means a second to last. It explains a lot of what's going on. I mean, California, where they're making it so they can't make affordable homes, so they can only make McMansions or giant they're doing that on purpose because it drives normal people off the land and only allows a certain class of people to buy up the land. This is in that book. And so we're seeing things that are draconian. We're seeing things that are simply made to drive. I mean, look at all the pressure on farmers and ranchers now. They want to have it so that like cows have like RFID collars, huge expense. All these people who have been doing ranching passively for so many years, now they're going to make it so they can't get that income, which is going to make it so they can't do their property tax and they're going to raise that again too, right? And they're going to drive them off the land. The end game here is to drive all of us off of land, make us renters. This is literally what they did to my people in Ireland. This is what the Brits did to the Irish. And so that's what's going on. And I feel like that is simply a product of that. And PFAS, it's killed by detergent. It's destroyed by detergent. It's destroyed by certain fungi, naturally occurring fungi. So my feeling is that once we stop the bombardment, we can process these things. And the same thing with our body. It takes like, 2 years to process PFAS, but we're constantly taking it. So we never like get through the mountain of it in us. We just build the momentum. We can process these things out naturally. Nature will find enzymes to process these things out, but we have to give it the breathing room to do it. And tracking it down to the sources for why these things are there. I mean, you guys know Teflon tape, you wrap it around the piping that you're redoing your thing and then you put it in. Yeah, that's PFAS. So in other words, all the irrigation, all the plumbing for most of America is PFAS laden. So they knew that. Like they all knew these studies, they all knew all this information and they just did it anyway. So I really, really hope that we're entering a time period where we start testing more so that we protect our kids, protect ourselves, but especially protect our kids so that they can have, children without any problems, and really detoxify and bring back nature really strong. Because the reality is when nature is strong, there's a huge buffering capacity in nature itself. The waters are cleaned by the coastlines and all that. Nature's designed to take care of things and clean things up and erase all trace of what was been. So we really just need to step into the natural cycles. That's all I really did. It was kind of a miracle though when I did it, because people were like, wait, we can do what's natural? And it's like, well, yeah, how did soil get here in the first place? And it's just been incredible. So check out the book. I'm here for the rest of the day and I'll be here for a panel later. But thank you so much.
Yeah, guys, thank you, Matt. If you didn't get your question answered, I recommend hanging out near him at lunch. And yeah, lunch is at 12:30, so we'll be back up then.
Depends. City water is probably gonna have fluoride in it and other things, but your well water. I live next to a cemetery.